The person you love got drunk with their friends last night, and shortly after midnight, one sentence silenced the entire room. Their closest friend placed a glass on the table, looked directly into their eyes, and said, "Stop telling everyone they abandoned you." You created a situation where staying became impossible. Nobody laughed. Nobody changed the subject. Even the music playing from the speakers suddenly seemed too loud, because every person sitting around that table understood exactly what those words meant. Your person had spent months allowing people to believe that you walked away without explanation. They had described themselves as the one who was left behind, the one who tried, the one who never received a clear answer. But last night, surrounded by people who knew what really happened, that carefully protected story finally collapsed. The question is not simply why their friend confronted them. The real mystery is what your person did before you disappeared from their life, why several friends agreed to remain silent, and what was hidden inside an unopened envelope that one of them had secretly kept for almost 7 months. The evening had not been planned as a confrontation. It began as a private celebration for one of their friends, who had just completed the final rehearsal for an upcoming wedding. There were only 6 people in the back room of a small restaurant, the same group that had known your person through nearly every important chapter of their adult life. They ate, exchanged old stories, and made jokes about how quickly everything was changing. One friend was getting married. Another had accepted a new position across the country. Someone else had recently become a parent. As the conversation moved toward commitment, courage, and the decisions people make when their lives are about to change, your person became unusually quiet. They drank faster than everyone else. They checked their phone repeatedly, even though no new message had appeared. On the chair beside them was an empty place originally reserved for another guest. Nobody mentioned whose name had once been written there, but your person kept looking at that chair as though someone invisible was still sitting in it. Their friends had seen that behavior before. They had watched your person open old conversations with you and scroll through months of messages without typing anything. They had watched them pause whenever someone used your name. They had heard them claim that they were finally moving forward, only to become distant whenever a song, place, or familiar date reminded them of you. Last night was different because the wedding rehearsal had forced everyone to speak honestly about love. During dinner, the friend getting married described the most frightening moment in their relationship. It was not the proposal or the thought of commitment. It was the night they almost lost their partner because pride prevented them from admitting they were wrong. Love did not save us by itself, the friend said. We survived because someone finally told the truth before silence made the decision for us. Your person lowered their eyes after hearing that sentence. One of the others noticed, and that was when the first hidden detail began moving toward the surface. A friend named Clare asked your person whether they had heard from you recently. The question sounded casual, but the room changed immediately. Your person gave the same answer they had repeated for months. They said you had made your choice. They said you stopped trying. They said they could not force someone to stay when that person clearly wanted a different life. Claire listened without interrupting, but the expression on her face became harder with every sentence. She had been carrying something in her bag all evening, something your person believed had disappeared long ago. Another friend attempted to steer the conversation away, reminding everyone that this was supposed to be a celebration. Clare refused. She had spent 7 months watching your name become attached to a version of events that was incomplete, unfair, and designed to protect your person from confronting their own fear. She finally placed both hands on the table and asked, "Are you going to tell them what you did before they stop trying, or are you going to keep pretending their silence came first?" Your person stared at her as though she had violated an agreement. That reaction revealed more than any spoken confession could have. The others knew there had been an agreement, although not everyone understood its full purpose. Months earlier, your person had asked their closest friends to stop discussing you. They were told not to provide updates, not to carry messages between you, and not to encourage reconciliation. At the time, your person explained that distance was necessary. They said you both needed freedom, and any continued contact would only deepen the pain. Some friends believed them. Others suspected the request had less to do with healing and more to do with control. If nobody mentioned you, your person could avoid hearing that you were still hurting. If nobody questioned the story, they could continue believing that you had chosen to leave. Silence allowed them to live inside an explanation that demanded nothing from them. But Clare knew the silence had begun before you walked away, and she knew why. 7 months earlier, your person had been offered a professional opportunity in another city. It was the kind of opportunity they had worked toward for years, but accepting it meant leaving within 6 weeks and remaining away for an uncertain amount of time. Their family strongly encouraged them to accept. Several relatives were financially dependent on the stability the new position would provide, and your person felt responsible for protecting everyone who had supported them. The decision should have been shared with you directly. You were emotionally involved, and although the relationship may not have carried a public label everyone understood, the bond between you was real enough that leaving without an honest conversation would cause damage. Your person knew that. They spent several nights preparing to tell you. They wrote messages, deleted them, and even practiced the conversation alone while driving. Yet every time the moment arrived, fear replaced honesty. They were not only afraid you would ask them to stay. They were more frightened that you would offer to go with them. That possibility forced them to confront questions they did not feel prepared to answer. Were they ready to build a life that included you openly? Could they accept the responsibility of being chosen so completely? What if you changed your plans and later regretted it? What if the relationship failed after you sacrificed something valuable? Instead of trusting you to make your own decision, your person convinced themselves that pushing you away was an act of protection. They began responding more slowly. They avoided conversations about the future. When you noticed the change and asked whether something was wrong, they told you they were simply overwhelmed. Each incomplete answer made you question yourself more deeply, while your person interpreted your growing uncertainty as proof that distance was already happening naturally. Clare had argued against that plan from the beginning. She told your person that protection without consent easily becomes control. She warned them that withholding the truth would not prevent pain, it would only determine who carried the pain without understanding it. Your person refused to listen. They believed a gradual withdrawal would be kinder than asking you to make a difficult choice. They told their friends that if you truly wanted to remain connected, you would somehow understand what they could not say. It was an impossible standard. You were expected to recognize a hidden fear, discover a secret relocation, and reassure someone who would not admit they needed reassurance. When you finally stopped chasing explanations, your person treated that response as confirmation that they had been right. Yet the truth was that you did not stop caring. You stopped entering conversations where your honesty was met with silence. The first piece of evidence appeared 3 weeks before your person moved. You had written a message explaining that you sensed something important was being withheld from you. You did not accuse them of betrayal or demand an immediate commitment. You simply asked for one honest conversation. You wrote that you could handle difficult information, but you could not continue building trust around answers that changed depending on the day. Your person read that message repeatedly. Claire saw it because your person showed it to her while asking what they should say. Claire advised them to tell you everything. Instead, your person sent a short response claiming they needed space and did not know when they would be ready to talk. That answer was not entirely false, but it concealed the decision that was controlling every other part of the situation. You respected the request for space, although it hurt more than your person understood. For several days, you remained quiet. Then you learned about the move from someone outside the relationship. It was not a close friend or relative. It was a professional announcement shared among people connected to your person's workplace. Your person's name appeared beside the city and starting date, making it clear that the decision had already been finalized. You were not devastated because they had accepted an opportunity. You were devastated because strangers had been allowed to know the future before you were trusted with the truth. When you confronted them, your person defended the silence by saying nothing was certain until the paperwork was complete. But the paperwork had been completed weeks earlier. They were no longer hiding uncertainty. They were hiding a choice. That conversation became the memory your person later used to justify everything. You were angry, but beneath the anger was grief. You asked why they had allowed you to feel foolish for noticing the distance. You asked why they insisted nothing was changing while privately preparing to leave. Your voice became unsteady, and your person interpreted the emotion as a warning that including you in the decision would have created more pressure. Instead of recognizing that the pain came from secrecy, they blamed the pain on the connection itself. They told you they could not carry emotional responsibility for both of you while preparing for a major transition. Those words remained with you because you had never asked them to carry your emotions. You had asked them not to hide the truth. When the conversation ended, neither of you understood that one sentence had permanently altered the way you saw your place in their life. A week later, you contacted Claire. You did not ask her to convince your person to stay. You wanted to understand whether the relationship had meant what you believed it meant. Claire was placed in an uncomfortable position. She cared about both of you, but she had promised your person she would not interfere. She told you that the move was complicated and that your person was under significant family pressure. Then you asked a question she could not forget. You said, "Did they pull away because they stopped loving me, or because loving me made the decision harder? Clare knew the honest answer. She knew your person had spoken about you nearly every day. She knew they had cried after packing an object you once gave them. She knew the thought of leaving you caused more fear than the move itself. Still, she gave you a careful answer that protected her promise rather than your right to understand. Clare told you that your person needed to focus on the life they were building. She said it would be healthier not to wait for an explanation they might never be able to give. You thanked her, even though the answer quietly confirmed your worst fear. You believed your person had chosen a future that did not include you and had asked their friends to help deliver that message indirectly. What Clare did not expect was that you would accept the answer with dignity. You did not send angry messages. You did not appear uninvited or demand closure. You began removing yourself from a situation where your presence seemed unwanted. That was when your person noticed the silence they had claimed to need. At first, they expected you to reach out again. When you did not, they started describing your absence as abandonment, because admitting the real reason would mean acknowledging that you had finally respected the boundary they created. However, there was another part of the story that nobody at the table knew except Clare. 3 days after your conversation with her, you delivered an envelope to her apartment because you did not trust yourself to send another emotional message directly. Your person was scheduled to visit Clare that evening. You asked her to give them the envelope and made one request: they should open it only when they were prepared to answer honestly. The envelope was not a desperate love letter. Inside was a copy of a professional transfer approval you had quietly requested after learning about the move. Your company had agreed to allow you to work from the same city for 6 months without giving up your position permanently. You had not made the decision for your person. You had created an option, and the handwritten note inside explained the difference. The note said, "I will not ask you to stay, and I will not follow someone who cannot choose me openly. But if fear is the only reason you are leaving me behind, ask me what I am willing to choose before deciding for both of us." That single sentence changed Clare's understanding of the entire conflict. You were not demanding sacrifice. You were offering an adult conversation between two people whose futures were changing. Clare believed the envelope could repair something before the damage became permanent. She placed it on the table before your person arrived and told them you had left it. Your person recognized your handwriting immediately. For several minutes, they stared at their own name written across the front. They asked whether you had said what was inside. Clare answered honestly that she did not know. Then your person made the decision that became the center of last night's confrontation. They refused to open it. They said accepting the envelope would restart a conversation they had already decided was too painful. Clare argued that refusing to read your words was not closure. It was avoidance. Your person became defensive and told her to throw the envelope away. They said if the contents were important, you would eventually say them directly. Clare reminded them that you had already attempted direct conversations repeatedly. The argument ended when your person pushed the envelope back across the table and said, "I cannot let one message change the decision everyone is depending on me to make." That statement revealed the real conflict. They were not protecting you from sacrifice. They were protecting themselves from discovering that another future was possible, because choosing that future might disappoint their family and force them to take responsibility for what they genuinely wanted. Claire could not destroy the envelope. She placed it in the bottom of a locked drawer, intending to return it after emotions settled. But the weeks passed quickly. Your person moved. You stopped asking questions. The transfer option inside the envelope expired after 30 days. Every day Claire waited made the truth harder to reveal. She felt guilty, but she also believed your person needed time to establish their new life. She convinced herself that opening the past would only create confusion. In that way, her protection began to resemble your person's. Both of them made decisions about what you could handle without asking you. Both believed silence would reduce harm. Neither understood that silence was becoming the harm. Last night, the unopened envelope was inside Claire's bag because she had decided to return it to your person after the wedding celebration. She had recently begun preparing to move and found it while emptying the drawer. Seeing your handwriting brought back every detail of the conversation. She realized that the envelope no longer belonged in her possession and that continuing to hide it made her responsible for preserving a false story. She had not intended to reveal it in front of everyone. She planned to speak privately after dinner. But when your person repeated the claim that you had simply chosen to leave, Claire lost the ability to remain quiet. She reached into her bag and placed the envelope on the table. Your person's face changed before anyone else understood what they were seeing. One friend asked what it was. Your person immediately told Claire to put it away. Their voice was low, but the panic behind it was unmistakable. Claire refused. She explained that you had delivered the envelope before the move and that it had never been opened. Several people at the table turned toward your person in disbelief. They had been told you never made a final attempt. They had heard that you disappeared after becoming angry about the relocation. Some of them had defended your person publicly because they believed you had rejected every opportunity for communication. Now an unopened message was sitting between them, proving that the story was incomplete. Yet the envelope alone was not the most damaging evidence. The greater revelation came when another friend admitted that they had also known part of the truth. Marcus, the friend who had tried to change the subject earlier, confessed that your person called him the night you learned about the move. During that conversation, your person admitted they still loved you and feared that speaking honestly would make them abandon the relocation. Marcus had encouraged distance because he understood how heavily the family depended on the new position. His motive was not romantic jealousy or cruelty. He had watched your person support relatives through years of financial instability, and he believed the career opportunity would finally give them security. He worried that a relationship decision made during an emotional crisis could lead to resentment. But he also admitted that he allowed practical concerns to silence a person whose life was being affected. I thought I was protecting your future, he told your person, but I helped you treat their heart like a problem that could be managed without their knowledge. The room became painfully quiet. Your person poured another drink, but the friend getting married removed the bottle from the table. They said alcohol could not become another excuse for avoiding what needed to be faced. Your person looked at the envelope again and asked Claire why she had kept it. Claire answered that she had been ashamed. She had promised you it would be delivered, and when your person refused it, she chose loyalty to the louder person instead of fairness to the absent one. She admitted that every month of silence made confession more difficult. Then she said the sentence that ended every remaining defense: they never stopped choosing you. They simply stopped begging to be chosen back. Your person's expression collapsed. Those words reached the part of them that had remained protected by the story of abandonment. For months, they had interpreted your silence as proof that your love was not deep enough to survive difficulty. Claire's sentence forced them to consider another explanation. Perhaps your silence was not the absence of love. Perhaps it was the final boundary of someone who had offered honesty, patience, and one last unopened message. Your person reached for the envelope, but their hands were shaking. They asked whether opening it after 7 months would make any difference. Claire told them it could not restore the expired opportunity or erase what you endured. It could only reveal the truth they had refused to face when the truth still had the power to change the outcome. Before opening it, your person confessed something the others had never heard. They admitted that they had seen you several weeks after the move. You were visiting the city for a work event, and you crossed paths in the lobby of a hotel. You did not notice them. They stood behind a group of people and watched you speak to a colleague. You looked calm, but there was a distance in your expression they had never seen before. Your person considered approaching you. They even took one step forward. Then they heard you say that you were learning not to chase conversations where only one person was willing to be honest. You were not discussing them directly, but the words felt personal enough to stop them. They left through another door and later told friends they had not seen you since the move. That confession revealed that their avoidance had continued even when life offered another opportunity. No friend had prevented that conversation. No family member stood between you. There was no deadline, misunderstanding, or hidden message. Your person saw you and chose fear again. This mattered because the story could no longer place all responsibility on Claire, Marcus, family pressure, or unfortunate timing. Other people had influenced the situation, but your person made the central decisions. They withheld the move. They asked friends to remain silent. They refused the envelope. They hid in the hotel lobby. They allowed everyone to repeat a version of events that protected their pride. Understanding the pressure around them did not remove their accountability. Your person finally opened the envelope. The paper had been folded carefully, and the date on the transfer approval immediately exposed how early you had tried to create another possibility. You had applied before the final argument, which meant you were considering how to support their future even while they were emotionally withdrawing from yours. Your note was shorter than anyone expected. You did not promise forever or ask for immediate reconciliation. You wrote that you loved them, but love could not survive being excluded from every difficult decision. You explained that the temporary transfer would allow both of you to discover whether the relationship could exist in ordinary life rather than unfinished conversations. You ended with the sentence Claire had remembered for 7 months: "Ask me what I am willing to choose before deciding for both of us." Your person read the note once, then again more slowly. Their voice changed when they attempted to read it aloud. The confidence they normally used to defend their decisions disappeared, replaced by the grief of someone realizing that the answer they feared had once been waiting inside an envelope they refused to open. They had convinced themselves that inviting you into the decision would destroy their career, disappoint their family, or burden you with sacrifice. The document proved that you had found a responsible option that required none of those things. The opportunity had existed for 30 days. It expired while your person told everyone there was nothing they could do. One friend asked the question nobody had been willing to ask before. If you had opened it that night, what would you have chosen? Your person did not answer immediately. They pressed both hands against the table and looked toward the empty chair beside them. Then they admitted they would have asked you to come. They said the possibility frightened them because it was exactly what they wanted. Accepting your offer would have required them to tell their family that the future was not theirs to design. It would have required them to trust that love could survive uncertainty. Most importantly, it would have required them to become visible, to admit publicly that you mattered enough to be included in decisions that previously belonged only to duty, fear, and expectation. Marcus asked why your person had spent months saying you chose not to follow. Your person answered with a truth that changed the meaning of the entire evening. They said, because admitting they offered to stand beside me would mean admitting I was the one who stepped away. I let everyone call them distant because I was ashamed to say I never gave them a fair choice. Nobody interrupted. Your person continued, acknowledging that family pressure influenced them but did not control their hands when they pushed away the envelope. Claire's mistake did not force them to hide in the hotel lobby. Marcus's advice did not require them to describe you as uncaring. Other people helped me justify the silence, they said, but I was the one who kept choosing it whenever honesty became uncomfortable. That was the confrontation their friends had avoided for months. Some apologized for supporting a story they never questioned. Others admitted they had noticed contradictions but remained quiet because challenging your person seemed disloyal. The friend getting married reminded everyone that loyalty is not agreeing with someone's most convenient version of the truth. Real loyalty sometimes requires refusing to let a person build their future around a lie that protects them temporarily and damages them permanently. The group had not conspired to hurt you. They had each made small choices that seemed understandable in isolation. One withheld a detail. Another repeated an assumption. Someone else avoided asking questions. Together, those decisions created a wall around your person's fear, while you stood outside believing the door had been closed intentionally. Your person asked what they should do now. Claire told them not to turn the discovery into another dramatic moment centered on their emotions. Crying, apologizing, or declaring love would not automatically restore your trust. The truth did not create an obligation for you to reopen the relationship. It only created a responsibility for your person to correct the false story and offer an honest account without asking you to comfort them. Marcus agreed. He said contacting you while drunk would be disrespectful and emotionally reckless. They needed to wait until morning, read the note again with a clear mind, and decide whether they were prepared to accept every possible answer, including no answer at all. Before leaving the restaurant, your person did something nobody expected. They opened the group conversation where several friends had previously discussed the breakup and recorded a message correcting the story. They did not blame Claire for keeping the envelope or Marcus for encouraging the move. They said you had attempted to communicate, that they refused to receive your final message, and that their repeated claim of abandonment was false. They admitted they allowed friends to misunderstand you because the misunderstanding made their own behavior easier to defend. The message ended with a sentence that left the room silent again. I was not left by someone who stopped loving me. I lost access to someone who finally understood that loving me could not require disappearing inside my fear. The message was not sent to you. It was sent to the people who had heard the false version. That distinction mattered. Your person began repairing the damage where they had created it instead of performing accountability only where it might earn reconciliation. They also told their family the truth that same night. They explained that the move had never required them to erase you and that they had used responsibility as a reason to avoid vulnerability. Their family's reaction was complicated. Some defended the original decision. Others admitted they had placed too much pressure on your person to prioritize stability over every personal relationship. No single conversation solved the deeper pattern, but for the first time, your person stopped using family expectations as a shield. This morning, after reading your note again, your person began writing a message to you. They deleted the first version because it focused too heavily on how much pain they were feeling. They deleted the second because it contained promises they had not yet earned the right to make. The final message was simpler. They told you that Claire had returned the envelope and that they had finally read it. They acknowledged every moment when direct communication had been available and fear had been chosen instead. They corrected the claim that you abandoned them. They apologized for allowing others to believe you did not care. Most importantly, they stated clearly that you did not owe them a reply, forgiveness, or another opportunity. They did not ask you to make a decision immediately. They did not say time was running out or that their life would collapse without you. They admitted that love without visible courage had placed you in an unfair position. They said they were beginning the work of understanding why being deeply loved felt more threatening than losing the person offering that love. They promised only what they could control: honesty, accountability, and respect for whatever boundary you chose. Whether that message has reached you yet is not the most important part of this story. The most important part is that the truth now exists without being hidden behind friends, distance, or an unopened envelope. You deserve to understand what this revelation means for you. It confirms that your pain was not created because you were difficult to love. You did not imagine the emotional change. You were responding to information being withheld and decisions being made without you. Your questions were not unreasonable. Your desire for clarity was not pressure. Another person's inability to communicate directly was never proof that you asked for too much. You were trying to participate in a relationship where your person wanted the comfort of being loved without accepting the vulnerability of building a future openly. Understanding their fear does not require you to excuse the consequences. You may recognize why family responsibility mattered to them. You may understand why Claire hesitated or why Marcus believed the career opportunity needed protection. Compassion can explain human behavior without declaring that behavior acceptable. You are allowed to acknowledge the complexity and still protect yourself. You are allowed to forgive someone privately without restoring the same access they once had. Forgiveness releases you from carrying the past. Reconciliation asks whether the future can be trusted. Those are different decisions, and only you can decide whether consistent behavior has created enough safety for another conversation. The unopened envelope proved that your love once offered a real possibility. It does not mean you must recreate that possibility now. 7 months can change a person. You may have found peace, developed new boundaries, or become someone who no longer wants the life you were previously willing to build. Your person's delayed honesty cannot require you to return to the emotional place where they left you. A dramatic confession may be meaningful, but consistency will reveal whether the confession represents transformation or temporary regret. Watch what happens after the emotion fades. Notice whether they continue correcting the story when there is nothing to gain. Notice whether they respect silence without turning it into another accusation. Notice whether they communicate before fear becomes secrecy. If this truth speaks to something you have lived through, comment, "I will not disappear inside someone else's fear." Like this video if you believe genuine love requires honesty before loss, and subscribe for more emotionally powerful stories about truth, accountability, and self-respect. The person you love heard something last night that they could no longer dismiss. Their friends did not tell them that you were destined to return or that one apology would restore everything. They told them the more difficult truth: you had been willing to stand beside them, but they repeatedly chose a silence that made standing beside them impossible. That realization may change them. It may lead to the most honest conversation they have ever offered. But your life does not have to pause while they learn what courage should have looked like months ago. You were not abandoned because you lacked value. You stepped away because love without inclusion eventually becomes loneliness. You were not asking to control their future. You were asking not to be erased from a future that affected both of you. The truth inside the envelope arrived too late to preserve the original opportunity, but it arrived in time to return something important to you: the knowledge that your heart was sincere, your effort was real, and your decision to protect your peace was not a failure of love. Your person must now live with the responsibility of knowing that fear did not save them from pain. It created the exact loss they were trying to avoid. Whether they become capable of loving differently will be shown through actions taken over time, not words spoken during one emotional night. And whether you ever allow them close again remains entirely your choice. Choose the future where truth does not have to be discovered inside forgotten envelopes. Choose the love that asks what you want instead of deciding what you can handle. Choose the person who is willing to stand beside you when conversations become uncomfortable, not only after silence becomes unbearable. You can understand why someone was afraid and still refused to build your life around that fear. You can remember what was beautiful without returning to what was painful. You can leave the door closed without hatred, or open it slowly without surrendering your boundaries. Last night, one sentence exposed everything. You did not leave because you stopped loving them. You left because loving them had begun to require losing yourself. Now that the truth has finally been spoken, your person has an opportunity to change, but you have something even more powerful. You have the freedom to choose only the love that is brave enough to choose you honestly.